Something that has bothered me about Sister Wives this season is that Maddie is being targeted by Cody as some sort of shit stirrer family.
Hi y'all, and welcome back to the show. Make sure to subscribe and give this episode a thumbs up. If you haven't already, it makes a big difference to us today. We're diving into some powerful updates coming from Maddie Brown, daughter of Sister Wives. Patriarch Kody Brown. In the wake of Cody's growing distance from his family, Maddie has stepped forward with some pointed words that seem to shine a light on their strained relationship. It all started after they relocated to Flagstaff. That relocation was a definite turning point. The formerly cohesive family began to split apart, yet pretty much because of Cody's growing obsession with Robin, and her children, usually at the expense of the rest of the family. He's been absent from his children's lives as well as from those of his grandchildren ever since. And most recently, Maddie posted something that most fans think might be a quiet yet strong message to her father during season 19 of Sister Wives. Maddie appeared briefly a few times, and fans couldn't help but pick up on something odd. She only calls her dad Cody, never dad or father to many longtime viewers. This was a warning sign. It seemed like a pretty obvious sign that Maddie had emotionally and possibly even physically stepped back from him. Some of the fans took it to the extent of even proposing that following the devastating death of Garrison, Cody grew even further apart from his children and grandchildren. And judging by Maddie's recent behavior, it appears that she might be keeping her kids away from him altogether. Now let's discuss that Instagram story that actually set the pot to boiling. Maddie wrote a lengthy, emotive post about distancing herself from a person in her life she didn't specify. Names, but timing and tone indicate that she was writing about Cody in her message. She made it clear if someone can't respect her, they don't get access to her or to her children. You don't get to play family. When it's convenient, she wrote, and even more striking, she said she wouldn't let her kids witness abuse and mistake it for love. That's a great position to take, particularly coming from someone who grew up in such a public, multi-caded family life. Maddie underscored that her kids' peace is of the utmost importance and that she refuses to let disrespect become the status quo in their lives. Our time is valuable, she said, and as a mother, it's always my responsibility to guard them. How is Maddie these days? Then, well, long story short, despite the family drama, it appears she's in a happy and quiet life with her husband Caleb and the children in North Carolina. She's also blessed to live near her mom Janelle, who's building her dream house right near them. Maddie has taken a great pride in being a mom. Last week, she told us a lovely story about her daughter Evie's dance recital. After all those months of practice, Maddie was beaming to see her daughter perform on stage, and she spoke so eloquently about how Eve's limb difference has never been a hindrance. Rather, it has been a source of strength and inspiration for their family. She's sharper than a tack, Maddie said affectionately, and each time I get to watch her venture into the world, I'm reminded how fortunate we are to have her extra spark in our lives. Meanwhile, back in the Sister Wives universe, things only get hotter in the final installment of the season 19 tell-all special. Janelle Brown, Cody's ex-wife, spilled some stunning things about him throughout the special. We've watched Cody try to deflect blame, pointing fingers at his ex-wives rather than owning up to his part in the family's breakdown. At one point, host Coyote Krishnan had to directly challenge him to take responsibility for what's happened. But things really went south when Janelle spoke up with some harsh words about her ex-husband Cody. If you've been keeping up with the Sister Wives drama, you know that emotions tend to run hot, but this time it felt particularly personal. Let's begin with Marion the Third, installment of The Tell. All she revealed some surprising and rather disturbing things about Coyote Pass, the property that's brought more than its fair share of conflict. Mary remembered that when they were all still residing in Las Vegas, she had asked Cody one innocent question regarding how the property was being split. Appears reasonable, doesn't it? But she received hostility instead of a response. Cody lashed out at her and became evasive, nearly as if she had some ulterior motive. And it wasn't merely Mary. When Janelle mentioned the same issue, Cody responded to her with the same icy, defensive reply. That type of behavior sent red flags for Janelle on her sit-down with host Coyote Krishnan. In part 3 of the Tell-All, Janelle explained that she felt like her relationship with Cody had descended into a toxic cycle. She likened it to something known as love bombing, when someone inundates you with affection after hurting you only to get you back on track. She even compared it to the behavior of a narcissist. Suki asked her directly, Was she calling Cody a narcissist? Janelle hesitated, being diplomatic with words. "I'm not a psychologist," she said, "so I can't technically call him one," but she made it quite clear. She did see a lot of red flags, and the trend was hard to deny. Ultimately, she said she'd leave it up to viewers to make their own judgments. So what's next? In the Sister Wives universe, TLC released a preview for part 4 of the tell-all, and let's just say, it doesn't appear things are letting up in the teaser. Janelle reacts to something. Christine said that Cody cares more about appearances than anything else. And Janelle doesn't hesitate to agree. She states, Cody definitely prefers people to be polished and put together. It's almost like maintaining the image is more important than what's really going on under the surface. We also catch a glimpse of Cody obviously annoyed, wondering why Janelle and Christine continue to talk about him even after the breakups. You almost sense the annoyance emanating off of him. Robin speaks up as well, explaining she's perplexed and annoyed that people constantly bring her up. But Mary, in her usual tranquility, dispels the myth she never brought Robin home to Cody in the first place. And then there's this contradiction that's difficult to dismiss. Cody insists he never experienced a first spark with any of his wives except Robin. That's sure to rile up some feelings, whether that's his reality or merely a revisionist recollection. It's evident those words won't find favor with the rest of the family, the reality.
Felt icky to me that Cody gets to badmouth Maddie, but she's not there to defend herself. Well, Maddie has a podcast now, and while the podcast is not about sister wives,
however, is that the Brown family dynamics. The large collective mission they once thought they shared are themselves starting to break down under the strain of loss, disillusionment, and long overdue understanding. What had appeared to be a tight-knit, cohesive unit tied together by religion and love now is starting to crumble from within. Leading the dismantling is Maddie, one of the Brown daughters. She never was the loudest mouth, but these days she's been a kind of silent compass for others. Having moved a long way from the madness of Flagstaff, Maddie has forged a life of her own, raising her children, taking care of her own house, and keeping her head down. She no longer hangs on to the dream of oneness that the family used to hold onto, and perhaps that in its own subtle way says it all rather than act in anger or bitterness. Maddie has taken a different path, a path based on conviction, integrity, and perhaps most of all distance. But don't confuse that with detachment. If anything, recent comments show just how profoundly impacted she's been by her father's absence, not merely in presence, but in deed and heart. This isn't just a case of growing apart or generational misunderstanding. It's a slow result of years spent on the sidelines watching from the shadows, while others were prioritized. Cody used to think of himself as a sort of spiritual leader, a man called on for a holy purpose to create and lead a family bound together by common faith. But that job became increasingly difficult to do. Over time, managing multiple relationships was too much for him. One by one, those once strong relationships frayed with each wife who slipped away. The children who had quietly watched their mother's suffering often departed emotionally as well. Maddie once looked up to her father, but year after year that idolatry was supplanted with doubts about the person behind the rhetoric, and whether the ideal he once embodied was still true. She watched her mother, who had once been eternally patient and devoted, unravel behind closed doors. She witnessed how her father's universe gradually shrunk to center around one woman and her kids, and everyone else was an afterthought. Love that unconditional now appeared to be tied to strings. Family vacations were no longer shared. Instead, they were divided, broken. Maddie remained calm as long as she could, being respectful and attempting diplomacy. But time gets around to telling the truth. Eventually, even the most well-behaved child catches on when their parent ceases to appear, not merely at recital or birthdays, but in the emotional times when support is most required. And when Maddie did eventually speak out, she didn't do it in a tabloid or on a TV showdown. She expressed herself quietly, but forcefully. Through her private social media post, her words were enclosed in grace, but they did not spare. She wrote about boundaries, about the need to learn to say no to individuals who blur lines between control and love. She spoke of her part as a mother and her duty to shield her children not only from harm in the classical sense, but from manipulation from those who come in and out of their lives on their own terms. For so many adult children in the same position, what she said resonated. This wasn't merely about a reality television personality's family crisis. It was something painfully familiar. Those who appear only when convenience dictates, not when the relationship demands it. Maddie made one thing certain: respect is not up for debate, and access to her kids, that's not on the agenda either. particularly not for those who won't provide the same respect in return. While her message was brief, its reach echoed far and wide. Siblings nodded. In understanding silence, fans speculated even some members of her family appeared to grasp the hidden message behind what she said. This was not some tantrum. It was a definitive line in the sand, an authentic, strong message from a daughter to her father, and for a lot of viewers, one small thing said it all. When Maddie came on the show, she did not call Cody dad. She used his name to some that might have been casual or insignificant, but to others it felt deliberate, a means of taking back her own emotional space, of stripping away a title that in her mind had not been earned. This wasn't revenge, it was clarity. That was the tipping point Maddie had transformed. Not only how she lived her life, but how she conveyed her emotions. She no longer required Cody's presence, or his validation rather. She was creating something of her own, a life where her own definition of family was on the forefront, and that definition didn't include anyone who made her feel seen. Maddie's quiet rebellion has been strong. Her path hasn't been simple. To grow up in a big plural home meant both comfort and chaos. She knew the strength of seeing her moms hold on to one another, but also the heartbreak that resulted from favoritism, confusion, and being ignored. As a kid, Maddie had trusted in what she thought her parents attempted to practice. But with adulthood came clarity and at times awkward truth. Her style for withdrawing from the old ways of the family wasn't bombastic or confrontational. There were no grand speeches or public showdowns. She just moved on. She picked a partner who introduced stability, not drama. She established her home on love, not duty, and she quietly promised her own children they would never experience the same emotional, hollow wives she once did. Maddie appears for them every bedtime, reading, every school play, every scraped knee. She's there not merely physically, but completely present, intentional and guardian-like, and in appearing. She's redefining parenthood, for her motherhood isn't just something.
My leaving didn't change his kid's relationship with him. Cody can still fix his relationships with his children.
She does. It's something she's on a mission to do. She's both the guardian and the caregiver. She's mentioned how holy her home is, how calm it is, and she's made it plain. Even if hate shows up dressed in family, she won't let it in. One of the most impactful things she's ever said that she won't teach her kids. That cruelty is love, that being dismissed or ignored isn't something they should ever accept in a relationship. It's a message that has strongly resonated with her audience, particularly daughters of emotionally absent or distant fathers. Because Maddie is not only a mother, she's healing, she's growing, and in the process, she's speaking out on behalf of so many others who have felt the same pain. One of the saddest aspects of Maddie's tale is the emotional distance between Cody and his grandchildren that speaks volumes for itself. He doesn't arrive for birthdays, he skips milestones, and those little children who once addressed him as grandpa are now starting to know him secondhand. Only not from personal experience, and maybe Cody doesn't fully grasp the weight of that. Maybe he sees himself as unfairly pushed out. But the truth is, it's the natural result of years of emotional distance. Relationships, especially with children, aren't something you're automatically owed. They have to be nurtured, protected, and earned. And now Cody's formerly enormous world has contracted. He used to balance multiple wives, homes, and children. But these days, things are far more subdued. His relationship with Robin, his former emotional anchor, appears to be the sole other robust connection he has left. Even that, however, appears altered to me, as more of his kids become adults and parents themselves. They're beginning to ask tough questions, and Cody has to deal with the ramifications of his decisions without the cushion of his extended family to temper. The shock Maddie's words weren't merely about boundaries on the personal level, they asked for a much bigger conversation. She wasn't drawing a line merely for herself. She was illuminating a larger cultural moment. A moment when a daughter gets up and asks a difficult question. What does it actually mean to be a father? And while those questions remain, Maddie has built a life. Far from the turmoil of TV lights and family soap opera. Quietly in North Carolina, she's discovered her center, a life anchored in peace, creativity, and values she battled hard to define on her own terms. Her mother, Janelle, is just a short distance away and is a constant, soothing presence. Both of these women have redefined what family means. One founded on respect and love, not habit. For habit's sake, purpose over pressure and presence over performance have been their decisions. Maddie doesn't speak much about her history anymore. When she does, it's not out of bitterness, it's out of closure. Her concentration now is on the beauty of daily life. She talks about seeing her daughter, who has a limb difference, light up the stage in confidence, And poised, she is amazed at her son's increasing questions about the world. These are the memories she is accumulating. These are the stories she wishes her children to pass down, moments constructed on connection, not deficit in a way. This is the start of a new legacy. Maddie Brown is no longer the troubled teenager caught up in the wreckage of a broken family seeking approval. She's an adult now with a distinct identity and voice. Yes, she still bears her father's surname, but other than that, the comparison appears to end there. Maddie has opted for clarity over ambiguity, for courage over sentimentality, and above all, love over blind devotion to a flawed system. Could there ever be a day when Cody attempts to repair what was damaged? Perhaps, but should that day ever arrive, he won't be getting together with the daughter. He knew he'll be greeting someone different, a woman forged in truth, experience, and strength. Meanwhile, Cody's once celebrity polygamous family continues its private disintegration in the third and last installment of the much-hyped Sister Wives Tale. All special feelings remain raw, and Kendra is front and center and out of that emotional rubble. One voice emerges stronger, louder, and no longer silenced. By Janelle Brown, who was long regarded as the peaceful, down-to-earth wife of the group, shocked even die-hard fans with her honesty once guarded and measured. Janelle now speaks boldly and clearly. She says on national television what many wouldn't ever have the courage to say. She criticizes her former spiritual mate, not only for what he did, but for the deceptions he held on to the woman who had once lived for common purposes and common dreams. Now shatters the myths that kept their family united for so long. She gets her facts straight in her honesty. Prior to Janelle's unfiltered moment, it was Mary.
I know that Maddie has not had any conversations with her dad. She's not called him.
Who ignited the fire as the special started talk turned to Coyote Pass, the ground that had previously stood as a beacon of togetherness and promise of the family's future. Today, it's become a symbol of all that went, our division, betrayal, and broken promises. During her interview with host Sukaina Krishnan, Mary described an experience that has left her with a lasting impression well before the move to Flagstaff. When the family was still living life in two houses in Las Vegas, she had posed a basic question: how would the house be divided? It wasn't a suspicion or greed question. It was a question based on reason of seeking clarity when they were making choices that would define their lives. They had the right to ask why the land was distributed this way. But when Mary asked that very question, Cody didn't respond with a soothing explanation. Instead, it ignited a storm. Mary remembered how his tone immediately became biting, accusatory. Really, like simply inquiring about the land had been a betrayal. It made her think he assumed she was greedy, taking more than was hers, and she wasn't the only one to feel that way. Janelle later corroborated that she received the same bitter response when she inquired about the land and what the future was for it. This land was to be a shared heritage, a family place where all their children could eventually make homes, where the vision of a united family could become real. But somehow along the way, that vision was distorted. The land became less of a promise and more of a means to an end. It became less about family and more about power. And then there was a moment that sliced through the quiet, like a knife. Janelle spoke. She breathed in the kind of breath that seems to take years of subterranean thoughts with it, and then started to talk about something that many in the room, and certainly many viewing on their televisions, were all too familiar with, as Suki coaxed gently. Janelle began to untangle the thread she'd only ever fully seen after stepping out of the den. She described how each time things were bad, really, really bad, there would be this flood of affection, all of a sudden, a warm gesture, compliments, apology, attention. It was like being swept off your feet again. But she eventually came to realize that this was not about healing. This wasn't reconciliation. She said, letting the words hang in the air, it was manipulation. Suki cocked her head eyebrow, shapes rising a fraction of an inch. That really does sound like love bombing, she said. Janelle nodded. Yes, she said it was always the same pain caused then a flood of charm and promises, and then it would all repeat next. Was a moment that completely changed the atmosphere of the room. It's the behavior of a person who requires control. Janelle explained calmly, I'm not saying this as a diagnosis, but the patterns. It's difficult not to see them for what they are. Suki inquired tactfully, You're saying Cody is in that pattern? Janelle breathed. She didn't blink, didn't retreat. I'm not a therapist, she stated. I'm not going to make a clinical diagnosis. But when I began reading about narcissism, I felt like I was reading pages out of my own diary. She went on, her tone edged with both clarity and sadness. The characteristics, the blame. Shifting, the lack of responsibility. The emotional high immediately following the emotional pain. It's all present. Others can make their own judgments. What followed was a quiet stillness. Everyone could feel it, because this wasn't just about one relationship or one TV show. This was about the emotional wear and tear that builds up over years. It was about gaslighting, confusion, and finally a woman standing in her truth. Janelle talked about how frequently she doubted her own reality. Cody had a knack at making her feel that she was overreacting. If she cried, she was being dramatic. If she remained silent, she was cold. Whatever she did, it was never right, because the rules were constantly shifting. When Mary attempted to speak up for herself at the time, she wasn't met with empathy. She was normally met with silence or downright scorn. And that silence, it was more deafening than words. It wasn't a disagreement. It was like her presence itself was being erased. "You feel invisible?" she said, "unless you're sticking to the role he assigned you. But the moment you step outside that script, you're suddenly the problem. That experience wasn't hers alone. Janelle and Christine, different paths, same clarity as the tell-all unfolded." Janelle's personal revelations began to echo sentiments Christine had already expressed when asked if she agreed with Christine's view that Cody cared more about image than substance. Janelle didn't hesitate. "Everything's always been about appearances. With him," she said, "polished-looking picture, perfect. Everything had to be right-looking, even if nothing felt right." There was the slightest break in her voice as she went on. "It makes you wonder, were you loved because you were you, or were you just there to fill out the picture?" That level of candor resonated with many in the audience, particularly women who have struggled with relationships that appeared good on the surface but were hollow at heart. Mary speaks truthfully, and Robin gets caught in the middle when the topic came around to Robin late in the show. The dialogue became more emotionally fraught. Robin, visibly upset, asked why the other women still spoke of her in those terms. "I thought we had passed that by," she said. "Thought we were creating something in the name of peace. Why am I still a part of this?" But Mary replied with honesty and without bitterness. "I just want to be honest," she said levelly. "I didn't get you together. That tale continues to circulate, and it simply is not true. You and Cody forged your relationship on your own, and that's fine, but let's not do history wrong." Her voice wasn't bitter, it was honest. The discussion, as with the family itself, was undergoing a mass confrontation. Everyone needed to look in the rearview mirror before they could drive forward. Cody's turned defensiveness or denial in a preview of the last tell. All episode, Cody was seen clearly agitated, hands waving, voice escalating. He appeared disturbed by the nakedness of what had been revealed. "They're making fun of me," he said, clearly agitated. "They've departed, and now I'm the joke in their therapy sessions. Why am I still the subject of every conversation?" His anger only pointed to what had been evident all along, the emotional chasm between how he perceived things and how the women felt them to the women. This was not about revenge, it was about recovering their voices. Conclusion: when truth sets you free, this third installment of the tell. All wasn't a recap yet, it was a release for Janelle especially. It wasn't about finger-pointing or playing victim. It was about emerging from the fog and finally having clarity when she decided to use a word that suggested extreme emotional trauma. It wasn't for theatrics, it was to label something that had tormented her in silence for years. Not to shame, not to accuse, but to recognize the actual cost it had extracted from her mind, her spirit, and her sense of self. There she stood beneath the glare of the lights among the cameras before a national viewership that had been following her for more than a decade, and instead of remaining silent, Janelle did something courageous. She spoke the truth. Not a neat one, not the kind that maintains the comfortable status quo, but the raw, sometimes hurtful, and absolutely honest truth. And for all those who've walked alongside this one, seasons or years, it was a reminder that healing so often begins not with an embrace, but a truth spoken aloud. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this episode impactful, don't forget to subscribe and give it a thumbs up. We'll be back soon with more updates and insights. Take care and see you next.